mini game, and we said there's still obviously a whole bunch to do. So just to remind ourselves where we are now, we have it so that you can move the cursor around and it stays within the bounds of the screen, and otherwise works great. But that's all that we've got so far. Okay, so we also had it, although I think I removed this part. Um, which was we needed to randomly assign the cards to being one of the three categories, right? And for testing, I had it say, so there was a little text box that appeared above each card with their card number, whether or not they were a one, a two, or a three. Um, and so, yeah, so we've got that set. And then maybe while we're at it, we should probably do something to handle the card flipping mechanic. Um, we also need to handle basically like the game logic, right, of matching these things, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to get it so that when I hit A on or B, whichever button, when I'm over a card, it flips that one over. And by flip over, what we'll mean is we'll just switch the art to whatever it's supposed to look like instead of being the back of the card. Okay, so let's get that in there first. And so what we would want to do is tie this to, well, we've got the button activity that's handling the movement. We need something like that, but just for the um, the A button or whichever one we pick. Okay, so that part's not too hard, right? We just need on. Okay, we'll just go with the A button because it's the default here. Um, what we need to do is, well, a couple things. Do we know where the cursor is? Okay, yeah, in two ways. We know its coordinates, but we also know that it's going to be overlapping with precisely one of the sprites. So what we could do is use one of those overlap functions. Okay, so if we go to sprites, um, the overlap thing that we used before is um, this, right? Now, I can't use that inside of a on a button pressed thing. Why not? I mean, it'd be nice if I could, but I can't. Okay, so why can't I plop this thing inside of this thing? I mean, the shape kind of gives it away, right? But I can't do that because this is basically its own event, just like a button being pressed. I can't mix them. Okay, so if I can't use this, then what do I have to use instead? Yeah, so I could use this, right? Now, in this particular game, is it possible for our cursor to ever interact with a sprite other than a card? No. Okay, so we could get away with using this thing. Now, the one downside to this pointy thing, and it's a pointy thing, which means we'll have to put it in an if block, right? An if then else statement, because it's a logical thing. Either it does or it does not overlap. Um, Okay, and if we look at, oh no, this is going to be annoying. Um, what did we call the cursor? Did we just call it my sprite cursor? Okay, so I want to change this one to cursor, right? And then we'll leave other sprite. Okay, so let's go to logic because we need an if this, right? And then we'll put this here. Okay, so yeah, okay, so this is another problem that we're going to run into because notice what happens when I do this, right? What does the error say? Okay, variable other sprite is never assigned. Okay, so what this means is, let me put down the other collision thing. Okay, So this is maybe a little bit hard to see on the screen, but do you see that in the overlap event, other sprite is in kind of this darker red, and here it's kind of in the slightly lighter red? Okay, so what's the difference here? Other sprite here is a placeholder. Other sprite here is not a placeholder. This has to be a specific name of a specific sprite. Okay. Um, so I guess the problem with that is, how many sprites are there? Or how many cards, right? There's 12. Do we want to have to use 12 statements that look like that, one for every single card? I mean, we could, but do we want to do that? No. Okay. So we need some sort of other way to know which card we're going to um, intersect with. Okay. Um, and actually, guys, now that I think about it, I'm really not sure that there's going to be any other way than having 12 different statements. Um, and the reason is that, um, oh, that's really annoying. Oh, I know what we could do instead. Let's actually switch the logic around. So the problem is we made pressing A our main event. What about if we make the overlap the main event and then check whether or not the A button is pressed, right? Same effect, but this way we get to use the overlap event the way we want it. Okay, now there is one downside to this approach. Um, namely, is the cursor overlapping something? Always. Okay, which means whatever we put inside that code is going to be running over and over and over again. Okay, which could theoretically cause a slowdown. It won't here, I don't think, because we're not going to be running that much stuff. But theoretically, we could have an issue. Okay. All right, so let's go with it that way, and that allows us to use the placeholder here, right? Okay, so let's do get rid of this, and then under controller, we can say is a button pressed. Okay, and use a logic statement. Okay, so we'll do this. So if we are overlapping and the A button is being pressed, then what do we want to do? Yeah, we want to flip the card that we're intersecting. Okay, now, how do we flip the card, right? What did we say flipping really means here? Yeah, just changing the art. Okay, so how do we change art? We have to in the sprite, we've got the set my sprite image to blah, right? Okay, so now the other problem that we're going to have is what goes, so other sprite is the thing that we just intersected with. What goes here? I have to pick a thing from my assets, right? So the thing that goes here has to be an image, okay? How do we know which image to pick? Yeah, so we assigned each card a number 1, 2, or 3, right? And we need to pick the image that corresponds with that, okay? But in order to do that, I first need to make, let's see, where are the, I need to make an array. Um, okay, that's not what I want. Images. Okay, hang on one second, guys. So essentially what I want to do is I want to make an array of images and then pick the corresponding one out. Okay. Now, I could do this with 3 if conditions, but I guess that's maybe the easiest way to do it. So you see the arrays here. I want to create an array of images, but can I? Is there any way to create an array of images? What can I make an array out of? Text or numbers? Okay, so that's not going to work. Okay, so I guess what we could do instead is we could just say, let's throw another logic thing here. Um, let's do, um, oops, get rid of that. Let's say if, let's see, other sprite is our thing. And so let's look at the data. So we need data would be the thing is number, item. Okay, we'll plop an other sprite here. What was the name of the, we called card type, right? Was the number. Okay, and then so then we can say, is this equal to 1? The number one. Yeah, so I pulled other sprite data of whatever as number, right? Because remember, that was one of the things we ran into before was, um, or last week, right? Is we have to make sure that the data type is correct, right? So number is not the same as text, is not the same as, um, Booleans or whatever. Okay, and in this case, we were just using 1, 2, and 3 as numbers. Okay. Okay, so does that make sense? All right, so what was the image that we said for number 1? Oops. I think, what did we say? We would do the hamburger and then the ice cream and then the pizza. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Okay, so we'll set it to the hamburger. Um, Otherwise, if it's equal to 2, what should we do? Yeah, set it to, so we need to change this to 2 and set it to the ice cream. Okay. And then finally, we'll do another else if here, and we'll just duplicate this same thing. Um, and we'll set it to, if it's 3, then we'll set it to the pizza. Yeah. Okay. Now, you might ask, why did I put an else here that doesn't have anything in it? That was deliberate because, for example, what happens if the card has already been matched or something? Do I want to be changing its image necessarily? No. So I'm just going to leave a placeholder thing there, and then we could use something like card type of 4 to indicate that um, it's been matched. Okay. And then, yeah, okay. So let's test this and make sure it works first, as is, right? So if I move, no change, but if I hit space, which is bound to A, um, oh, okay, why didn't it work? I see why. You guys see it? Yeah, not kind player, it needs to be kind card, right? That's what the cards are. And so it was not detecting the thing. Okay, and so now, okay. The benefit, well, okay, so now we're basically stuck because we haven't programmed in yet any matching stuff or them flipping back over. Okay. Um, all right. So, but what we can see though is that, do we in fact have 4 pizzas, 4 hamburgers, and 4 ice creams? Yeah. Okay. So that's good, right? Uh, and I think that looks pretty good, like visually. What do you guys think? Yeah. Okay, so what's next? We've got the flipping part working when the player hits a button, Okay, but there's sort of two modifications we need to make to this, right? Because can you just flip over cards willy-nilly? No. Okay. You've got to first um, be like, we need to have sort of like almost like a turn structure, right? So when you start the game, you're in turn one. When you flip a card, you're now in turn two. That allows you to flip one more card. Okay, and then we'll say it goes to turn three. Okay, and in turn three, what should happen? If the card's matched, then what? They stay. Okay, and then we up a score counter or something. Okay, otherwise they need to flip over, right? Both flip back to their regular art. Okay, and okay, we need to um, see what to say here. We need to keep track of, let's see, we need to keep track of which ones we flipped over, but then also, I guess, how many turns we've done, right? So in like the Mario game, could you just keep flipping cards until you were finished? Well, this wasn't a timer, but it was like you only got like five tries or something like that, right? Okay, so let's worry about the attempts part, a limited number of tries later, okay, and just get the mechanic itself working, and then we'll add in the sort of difficulty, okay. Okay, so what we essentially need to do then is use a number or several numbers, kind of like we use the card type here for each card. So we've got the card types with 0, 1, 2, whatever, to represent the state of that particular card. But similarly, we need a variable to represent basically the state that the game is currently in. Okay. And we can kind of pick the numbers arbitrarily, but let's just say state one means you get to flip over a card. And then state two means you get to flip over another card. And state three means that it's checking to see if those cards are matching and doing all of that stuff. And then once step three finishes, what should happen? It should go back to state one and start the whole thing over again. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. The other thing we need to take into account is on the card type, we've randomly assigned them to be a number one, two, or three. What number should we assign as the card type uh, um, if the card has been matched? Let's just arbitrarily say it's four. Okay. And the reason I want to do that is because then at later, do we want this to just simply be on A button pressed? No, we'd want it to be on A button pressed and card state is not equal to four, right? Because there's no point in doing something to a card that you've already selected. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Like, are you going to change the value of the match card before, or is that just going to be a placeholder for when the card is matched?
What I was going to do is change I mean, we could do several things. I was going to change the card type to actually being four, right? Now, this stuff isn't going to apply because once we set the thing to four, um, its art is still whatever it is. I'm just changing a number, and nothing in here said what to do if the card state was equal to four. So it'll leave the art as is. Okay. Um, and yeah, but I'll use four for matched, and that way none of this other stuff will happen to an already matched card. Okay. So does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So let's get in the game state. Okay. And then also the matching business. Okay. All right. So oh, let's see. Our friend on Twitch is back from more class before my actual 8 a.m. class. He must be in a different time zone because otherwise this isn't possible. Huh? What now? The what? Oh, yeah, it's all on YouTube. Um, hmm? No, I stream on Twitch and then I copy the recordings over to YouTube because Twitch only keeps them for uh 14 days. He does. He says he goes to UW Stout in Wisconsin. And which I happen to know some folks that work there. So, um, yeah. So, okay. Well, let's continue, shall we? Um, so we've got we're going to set the card type to 4 if it's a matched card. Okay. And the other thing we need to do is the actual matching gameplay logic. Okay. So um, we need to in the beginning of the game on start, we need to initialize some variables. Okay, so let's make a new variable and let's call it game state. Okay, and then what should the initial value of this be? Okay, what did we just decide for our game states? And this we just picked these numbers arbitrarily. We said 1 is you are ready to select your first card. 2 is you're ready to select your second card. 3 is going to be we double check for um, whether or not the stuff matches and all of that. And then it'll go back to 1 and the whole thing will start over. Okay, make sense? Okay, so the game state then, on what conditions do we need to update the game state? So when does the game state change from 1 to 2? Mm-hmm. After the first click. Now the click checking is happening here in the on the overlap with the A button. Okay, so this sets the images. Okay, but we only want to set the images if we are in card state number 1 or 2. Yeah. Yeah, so we need to nest this, okay? And in fact, what should we probably do here? Let's actually make a function, okay? And um, we'll call it flip card. We can put all of this stuff in there. And then what's so brilliant about that? Up here, what do? We just call flip card, okay? Which simplifies the way this looks a lot, right? Because that way I don't have to duplicate that block of code a whole bunch of times. I can just call the function that I've assigned to it a whole bunch of times. Okay, so right now the way this will work is exactly the same way it did like 30 seconds ago. Okay. Okay, Gucci, what's wrong? Um, no. Okay, so I just realized one thing. So you see how it's throwing an error here? Why is it throwing an error? Because other sprite is no longer defined because I'm not within this overlap event. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to modify this function. I could do that, or I could just pass it an argument. Okay. Okay, so what I did was I modified it so that, and let me go back and show you where I did that. So if you've already created a function, if you right click and you go to edit function, then you can add a parameter, okay? And the parameter can be basically what you can have as many of them as you want. Do I need to pass data to this function? Yes, I need to say which sprite it needs to work with. Okay. And so when you put sprite here and you put a placeholder, that's one of those placeholders like we've seen before. Okay, so I just plopped a sprite there as my placeholder. Okay, and I called it other sprite, whatever. Um, and now we don't have any errors. Okay, but when I call the function, what do I need to pass it? I need to pass it other sprite, the thing that we collided with. Okay, so let's make sure that it still works correctly. Looks good to me. Okay. All right, so we got that part working. Now, under what conditions, though, do we need to call the flip card, right? So what state should we be in? Yeah, less than or equal to 2, okay? Which is to say it's equal to 1 or it's equal to 2. Now, for speed, we can use the less than thing, or less than or equal to, but we'd have to remember that we can't use game state 0 anymore, right? For something else that we might add later. Okay, so as long as we're cool with that, um, then we should do this. Okay, so um, actually, what I will do is I'm going to do it slightly different than what you just suggested. Okay, and the reason is, so I need 2 of those. Okay, and then what was our variable, our game state? Okay, so I'm deliberately, oh no, I guess I could just copy this part. Okay, so I actually did it slightly different than what you just suggested, and for a particular reason. Okay, because do we do the exact same thing if we're in game state 1 or 2? The flipping part, yes. Okay, but what changes? What's different about those 2 states? The second state, well, we'll go to the third state, but for that, but the first state, when it flips, needs to switch the state now to state 2. And the second state needs to switch the state to state 3. And then we need to program in this stuff for state 3. Okay. So that's why I wanted to make them actually separate. Okay. So let's do call flip card. And then what do we need to do to the game state? Let's see, under variables, we need to set the game state to 2 here. And oops, I hit it. Set the game state to 3 there. Okay. Um, okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, now, do we have anything for game state 3 yet? No, there's no logic that's doing anything, right? So right now, we would go into game state 1, then 2, then 3, and we'd be sort of stuck there forever. Okay. So, um, all right. So what is game state 3 need to do? What do we need to do if we're in that game state? Um, oh, okay. Sorry. Card type 4 will be the match. Game state 3 will be to check if there is a match. Okay. Now, um, I guess we've got a little bit of a problem. Namely, because we were building this around the idea of an overlap, okay, if I, for example, so let me just do this here. Okay, so I put that one down. I'm now in game state 2. I'm ready to make my second move. Okay. Um, should I be able to match this, or should I be able to do this one? Should I be able to reselect the pizza? Okay. Do we have anything that prevents me from reselecting the pizza? No. Okay, so we need to worry about that. Okay, the second thing is once I hit um, what did I mess up, guys? Um, where? Well, let's see. We may have sort of a time issue. Um, oh, yeah. Okay, I see what's happening. Um, so I can hold the A button, right? So what's happening is when I hit the A button, this A button being pressed is true for more than just an instant, right? So what's happening is it's flipping it, going to game state two and saying, oh, okay, ready to go, and doing it again. Okay, so basically what we need to do is we need to put in some sort of delay uh, that we don't move game states until the A button is released. Okay, now if we go to the controller, what else do we have here? Um, we can check whether or not the A button is pressed. Yeah. Okay, this is a little janky, but it'll work. Okay, so what's going to happen this time? If I'm pressing the button, it's going to flip a card, switch the game state, and then come into this. Now, if my finger is still on the button and the button is still being pressed, what happens to that loop? It does run it, right? Because the A button's still pressed, right? Okay, but what happens inside the loop? Absolutely nothing, right? Except it keeps looping. And under what conditions is it going to stop looping? Only when I release the A button. Okay, so this is a pretty janky way to do it, but it'll work, right? I'm basically just sitting here waiting for the A button to be released. Okay, and then we are in game state two, but now that the A button is released, this can get re-triggered on the next card. Okay, does that make sense? I should have just picked tic-tac-toe. That one's a lot easier. Because we got a lot of crap to deal with here, right? Um, okay, so do you guys see the trick that I've done here? Now, could we also? I think doesn't the timer one have something like wait until something happens, right? So we could maybe do something like that also, but this certainly works. Okay. Now we want to do the exact same thing on the next one, right? Is just throw in this stupid endless loop. Um, okay, and now let's see if it works. Okay, so what should happen is if I hit A, oops, oh, well, we totally broke it. Um, well, crapola, guys. What did I manage to do? Hmm, this is an interesting problem now, isn't it? Oh, okay. So, I don't think we want to do this. Because I think what's happening is that when I hit A and I'm holding A, it's re-triggering this whole thing of code, right? So let's go back and make sure that that still works. Yeah, okay. So don't want to do that. I want basically, so I don't know why there's not, you see how there's um, A button pressed and then A button released? It's really annoying that there's no way to check whether or not the button is being released. Um, so, all right, well, let's look at the extensions and see what we've got to work with here. Mm, oh, that's not what we want. Oh, that's all light stuff for light strips and stuff. Okay, so we don't want any of that. There was also the timer stuff, so let's look at that. See what we got there. No, I don't really like any of that either. Okay, so let's see. I guess what we could do is, hmm, I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to have to think for a little while. Okay, well let's come back to this problem later. Okay, and think about something else at the moment. Namely, how are we going to check whether or not cards actually match each other? Okay, how would we do that? Like, what allows us to check whether or not two cards match? Yeah, the card values, right? Which I called card type. Okay. Now, I think what we need to actually do is we're going to need to create another local variable for each card. In addition to card type, we'll probably, I think, also need a card state. Okay. And the reason that I want to do this is because I want to think of, are you allowed to flip over a card that's already flipped over? No, you shouldn't be able to do that. Okay. Right now, other than the picture, do we have any way of knowing whether or not a card has been flipped over? No. Okay. So we need to have some sort of thing for that. The other is we need to have a different value for, is the card flipped over and currently in a turn cycle? Okay. By which I mean, let's say I flip over a card, I flip over another card. Okay. I need to look, do those two match? I don't need to look at all other cards that are also flipped over, because if they're still flipped over, they've already matched, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so let's start thinking about, like, what numbers should we assign to the states of the cards. Let's say card state 0 is it's unflipped. Okay, card state 1 means that it's flipped over and in the current turn. And card state 2 means it's flipped over and has previously matched, and so we can sort of ignore it from there. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so how are we going to assign the card types for all of these things? Well, fortunately, we've already got a place where we've been assigning card types to these things. What should the starting value of every card be? For the card state, yes, it should be 0. Okay, so I just need to duplicate that and set all 12 of them to be 0. Don't need to randomize anything there, right? Does that sound good? Okay, so let's do that. Okay, and then I can get rid of all of this stuff except for the list part. Oops. Yeah, all of that. Oops. Okay, because, and what is it? It's not card type, but card state. Okay, so what does this little thing do, right? It creates an array of all cards, which in this case there are 12, right? And for each card, it randomly selected a number for the card type and removed it from our selection pool so that we couldn't, like, we didn't end up with 12 hamburgers. We can only end up with 4 hamburgers, okay? And same thing for ice cream and pizza. And we're setting the card state to every last card to 0. Okay, good? Okay, so when I flip a card, what should happen? The card state needs to change, okay? But what we change it to depends on which game state we're in, okay? So if we're in game state number 1, that means that we're flipping over our first card, okay? And so what should we change the card state from? From 0 to, let's say, 1, okay? 1 meaning current turn, okay, or current pair, right? Okay, so we'll do that. All right, so we need to set, so for this we need the local variable in sprite, and it's going to be way the heck down here. Set item data to number whatever. Okay, so we need to flip card other sprite, set other sprite data card state to 1, and it put in a space there because autocorrect, so just it can't have that there. Okay, so does that make sense? Yeah. So now the card that I just flipped over is in state 1. Okay. Similarly, if we're in game state 2, then what should we do? I was going to use game state 2 for you've already flipped one card. Now it's your turn to flip the other one. I mean, yeah, I could have done it either way, but yeah, okay. So what I need to do then is set the other card's state to also number 1, okay? To meaning that it's currently flipped over, ready to check if it's a pair. Okay, so is that okay? All right, so we've got that. Now, let's write a function that's going to do check whether or not it's we've got a match. Yes. Oh, sure. Well, let me come look at it.
was working fine until we split them up.
Okay, I don't see any obvious errors. Did you go to the on start
It's top left, yeah.
and you did set the game state to 0 initially, so that's good. That's interesting.
You know, I changed like that because I had the wrong sprite, but even then, after I changed it, it was still working, and then we split them up and it just stopped working.
Yeah. I don't see anything wrong right this instant.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. I think I'll just have to sit down and dig
okay.
through it for, yeah. I don't see anything obviously wrong though. Um, okay, so let's see, where were we? Where were we? So let's see, we've got our function. We needed to check if we have a match, right, of the two cards. Okay, so the reason that I wanted to use a game state is because do I know where the two cards are that I've flipped over? Not really. Okay, so let me get an array. This is going to be kind of janky of all cards whose card type or card state is 1. Okay, now how many of such ones are there going to be when I trigger this function? How many cards will be of state 1 when I trigger the function to check if I have a match? There should only be exactly 2, right? I just don't know which of the 2 it's going to be out of the 12, right? Okay, so let's do this. Let's make a function and we'll call this, let's see, check pair. Okay. All right, what should check pair do? The first thing it's going to need to do is let's go up here and when we made an array of all sprites of type card, right? What did that do? That basically made an array of all 12 cards. And which cards do we care about? Right, but right now, if all we're trying to do is check, does this match? I only care about the 2 cards that are currently in state 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a loop. I'm going to say for element value of list, okay, and what's the list that I want? I want an array, where was that? Array of all sprites of kind card. Okay, what do I want to do? I want to check if the let's see, I want to check if, let me get this in here the way I want it. Oops, not that one. Sorry. I wanted this one. Nope, damn it. This one. Okay, so I want to check the item from the list. I want to check his card state. Okay, and I want to say if this is different than 1. Okay, okay. So if the card state is different than 1, I don't need to consider it, right? So can I just throw it out of my array? Can I just throw it out of the list? Hmm? Well, I'm not deleting the card. I'm just throwing it out of the list of things that I need to check, right? Um, well, actually, you know what? Let me do it this way instead. Mm, actually, no, hold on. No, I'll just do this. Okay. We'll remove, let's see, where is it? We want to, oh, this is going to be janky. Mm, this is annoying, guys. Yeah. All right. We're just going to have to do it this way. Okay. I don't think this is going to work, but where's card? Yeah. Okay. Um, hmm. Oh, okay. Maybe I can do this a different way. Let me try this. Okay, so let me make an okay. So here's a different idea. We'll just leave the list as is. Okay. Um, and I want to get basically I want to check any of um, the see how to say this. Okay, so I'm going to make a list of all 12 sprites, all 12 cards. Okay. One by one, I'm going to go through them and I'm going to check. is its card state equal to 1? Okay, how many cards will have this card state equal to 1 when I'm running this function? Precisely 2. Okay, I just don't know which of the 12 it's going to be. Okay, all right, so I'll go through. If the card state is equal to 1, I'll add its card type to another list. Okay, this other list I'm going to call checklist, and it starts out as having nothing in it. Okay, so I'm going through the cards. First card, let's say it's not in card state 1. Second state, blah blah blah. Hold on one second. I get to a card that's in card state 1. I'm going to take its card type and add it to this checklist. Okay. Okay, so when this is finished running, what should checklist look like? It should have 2 things in it, and what are those 2 things? The 2 card types for the flipped over cards. Now, those 2 numbers are either the same or they are not, which will give me a way to make a decision. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so that's what that's the idea. Okay, Sam, you had a question. Okay, so yeah, so we'll create this list, and then when we're done, it'll have 2 entries in it. We can check whether those 2 things are the same or not. And if they are, then we need to update the game or the card states to card state 2, which meant that they've already been paired, and leave them alone, and reset back to game state 1 so that we can continue this loop. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, hopefully. Yes, and who knew that making a matching game would be so difficult? Okay. Well, okay. So there's really 2 things here, right? It's not just that making a matching game is easy or difficult, but we're doing it within this language, right? And this language has limitations and features that we can use. And you see how this is sort of the kind of thought process that as you guys are working on your games, you need to be going through, which is to say, okay, let me try oh, wait, that's not going to work because blah, 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 or because I can't do this other thing that I would need. So I'm going to have to kind of change the approach, right? Right. So essentially, when you guys are programming, you see how I'm kind of thinking out loud, like emulate this, um, hopefully with fewer curse words because, yeah. Okay. Okay. But does sort of the process make sense? Okay. So carrying on. Um, so let's, okay, so what I'm going to do is to my list called checklist, I'm going to add the current item in my array of sprites, his card type, to the end of my list. Okay, so when this thing finishes running, what should be the checklist is going to be an array with exactly 2 things in it. Okay, so I can check whether or not those 2 things are the same. Okay, and in order to do that, I need to do get the value at entry 0 and get the value at entry 1. Okay, just to keep things spicy, what's the first element in a list? What position is he at in the list? Mm, no, that's not what I mean. So I just have an array of data. Forget the game, right? There's 5 things in this array. How do I get the first one out of the array? What do I call? Array of, what's the index of the very first thing in the list? 0, not 1, right? Isn't that great? Yeah, we ran into this last week, right? So we start counting with 0, not with 1, just to keep you guys on your toes. Okay, so Gucci. All right, so so there are 2 things in the list that I need to check. the dude at position 0 and the dude at position 1. And those are the only two things that are going to end up in this list if I haven't screwed it all up. Okay, so does that make sense? Okay, so let's check whether or not those two things are equal. Okay, so I need an equals block. And plop you here and you here. And then I need a logic block because I need an if. Okay, so those two things are either the same or they're not. What should I do if they're the same? But there's only two cards to be matched, right?
I thought we were doing
Four sets. No, we're doing 3 sets of 4. So there's pizza, ice cream, and hamburger, and that's it.
So you don't need to score all 4 matched to get.
No, you only need to score 2 of them for them to get removed from play. I mean, we could do that, right? But that'd be harder from a gameplay standpoint, and probably also from a programming standpoint. Well, from a programming standpoint, it'd just be we'd need more game states. But you know, yeah, okay. So if the two cards that we're looking at are matches, then not so much destroy. We could destroy them. Okay. Um, in fact, that may be for right now is probably an easier way to go. Okay. What's the downside to destroying though? Then they're not physically there, right? They don't appear. Which in the Mario version of this, they stayed put even after you've matched them. Okay. So yeah, let's actually go with the destroy just for right now, because then they're gone and they're out of the way. We don't have to worry about accidentally reselecting them, but we'll remove that later. Okay. Okay, so we need to destroy those two, but do we need to know which two to destroy? Well, sort of. Um, let's see. Okay, this is going to be kind of janky, guys, but um, all right, let me just do it this way. Let's go back through the list. Oops. All right, this is going to be a little janky, but it should work. Okay, let's make one other change, and I'll come back to this, which is um, we've got this game state problem, right? So let me temporarily remove these so that the game state always is in state 1. Okay. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to actually call. All right, hold on. Let me plop that out for just 1 second because I need to add in one other thing. Oh, and this should not be my list, but checklist. Okay, and then Oops, this should be 2. Okay, and let's try. All right, so let me just get this, make sure it works, and then go from there. Um, okay. Okay, that's not working then. Let's see. Now let's make sure that my function isn't screwed up. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, did I change the card state when I flipped them? Maybe that's the problem. Call flip card other sprite, set other sprite card state to number 1. Okay, so I did do that. Let me just, for right this instant, let me just remove this and put that here so that we're not worrying about this game state stuff. Okay. Hey, that worked. Okay. Ah, I know why. Okay. So I did, and that's why it worked. Okay. So let me change. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but what happened was, so right now, um, it only will work if I have a match the very first time I guess, right? Because what have I done, or what have I not done, maybe, is after you pick 2 cards, what happens if they don't match? Huh? Right now they stay up, okay, but the the card state for those things does not go back to 0, okay, which means the second time around, this array is going to have more than 2 things in it, okay, and they're not necessarily going to be the first 2, the cards I flipped over, okay. So the function right now works only if I get lucky and I happen to match on the first go, okay. And it's because what have I not done here at the end? So where's my function here? Okay, I don't have anything inside the else. Okay, so what happens if I don't have a match? The cards are left alone. What should I do? Flip them back over, which is to say, set their state back to state 0 and flip the art to the blank. Okay. Um, and that way, when I re-select 2 cards, then I'm ready to go again. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? So it worked only if I happen to get lucky the first time. Okay. Well, it's almost 9:15, so let's maybe pause work on this thing for a little bit. Um, Hopefully, you guys are learning that this is not trivial to just do stuff, right? Which means you need to use some time. It's going to take time to do your projects. Now, I think a few people still owe me project proposals. Cough, cough. Okay. Um, and what we'll do then is, um, I don't know. I mean, we could continue going with this thing, but I think for the sake of time, let's just kind of let this ship sail. Maybe I'll fix it up on my own and see if I come up with a brilliant way to do it. Um, and spend some time well, talking about and working on project stuff. Okay, so um, the what I basically like to do is every week I want you guys to be turning in basically where you are up until that point with your game. Okay, and I'm going to have you guys do peer review because it's always good to have other people's eyes on top of you. Okay, and then so there's that, and we'll do a sort of a couple of rounds of that until the final go of it. Okay, does that make sense? The other thing I want to do is next week, I suppose, because we really only have 3 weeks left until spring break. Can you guys believe that? Right, we're 4 weeks in, 3 weeks left. Next week, what I want to do is basically sit down and talk one on one with each of you for maybe 10 minutes or so. And so I'll do half of you on Tuesday and the other half on Thursday. And during the remainder of that time, then just work. Okay. The last thing is, I think I mentioned last time the Carnegie Museum. Did I tell you guys about that? So I picked a date for it. It's you guys, I can't obligate you to come to it because your class will be over by then because it'll be in April. But Saturday, April 23rd, which is not the weekend right before finals, but the weekend before that. Because the weekend right before finals seemed like a bad idea. Um, it'll be like in the early afternoon, like 1 to 3 or so. I'll have you guys there at noon so we can get set up. I'll feed you. Because food's always good. Um, yeah, and then we'll hopefully we'll be able to like not be in masks and shit by that point of time because I'm getting sick of this. So yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, so keep an eye on Canvas as I post the details for how the checkpoints basically will go, and yeah. All right. I'll see you guys later.